Good morning, Dallas. I'm Mariela, and I'm so happy you're here with us. Today starts our journey toward Easter Sunday, and we invite you to join us as we head toward spring and as we prepare our hearts for the most significant event in human history. If you're here with us at Lightridge, grab a coffee and say hi on your way out. And if you're watching with us online, we are so happy you're part of the Dallas experience. Enjoy the start of our series called Journey.
Hey, before anything, we're going to pray about what's going on the other side of the world. It's become a concern for every one of us. I actually expressed back in the fall concern about this with some friends. I said, I think as bad as the pandemic is, my bigger concern right now is the threat involving Ukraine. So this is what I want us to pray. This should be a reminder of how little control we actually have. In the West and in America, we're taught that life is about being in control. And we're taught that we really have control. And then things like this pandemic happen and this invasion that just seems, the whole world is against this invasion happening. And yet, Russia's still going through with this. And I believe it taps to the deeper reality that we all face, that in this broken world, we're not actually fully in control. We don't really have as much control as we think. And then what we're craving is the peace and healing of God. So I want to pray that for the Ukraine clearly, but that it would really be our ongoing prayer about our own lives, about our relationships, about the world that we're in, the plight of so many people in this world. So let's pray. God, it takes dramatic events sometimes to remind us that we are in a very, very imperfect world. Humanity is broken. We have less control than we often think we have. And we crave you. We desire your control, your peace, your solution, your answers. And God, not only for this country that's experiencing this invasion and the heartache and the lives that have been lost already, but beyond one geographic place or one country, we crave this for our world, that we would have your peace, we would have your healing, that you, Jesus, would move this earth and your people more and more, closer and closer to the renewal that you began on Easter Sunday. So we work hard here at Dulles to keep it real. I'm going to keep it real here today. That's really what this series is going to be about. We really far and away value transparency over pretending. And so here in this house, we're coming off of a challenging season. And actually, this house is full of anticipation right now. And that's not some kind of happy spin. The reality is that many years ago, Amy was diagnosed with a seasonal disorder. And until that point, until I was married to Amy, I believed that people could be affected by the weather. I grew up understanding that Seattle, for some reason that was a stereotype in my mind as a kid or as a teenager, that people in Seattle suffer from depression more than anywhere else because of cloud cover or rainy days. But I didn't really appreciate it until Amy and I were married, and we've been to many, many doctors, and there's routines that we go through every winter, but winter is a challenging time. It's not just the time of the challenge, but it's because of winter. It's not just during winter, it's because of winter that Amy really struggles with physical, from joint pain to headaches to how it affects her emotionally. So if you see Amy, leading a song on stage, or if you have a conversation with her, she reaches out to you, she's not pretending. She works hard at being an intentional friend. She works hard at the lyrics in the song, really conveying what she believes about God, especially so, in the winter months. And so we're actually anticipating light. I have a chart for many years now. I've had a chart about that tells through the winter, the sunrise and sunset times every day and how much daylight we have. Listen to this. On January 1st, the sun sets in Northern Virginia technically during the workday at 4:58 p.m. The sun has already set in Northern Virginia. And then, when we get to the beginning of February, our family is always talking every year, like, are we noticing the days are getting longer with just a little bit of daylight extra? And then in February, a minute and a half of extra light every day, 2 minutes extra every day. So today, we gain 2 minutes and 28 seconds of sunlight just today. Tomorrow, it's 2:29. So by Wednesday, and within 4 days, we'll gain 10 more minutes of daylight. And now it's picking up the pace, and it's super exciting to us. And if Amy gets a mild day and gets 15 minutes, no joke, 15 minutes sitting out on the porch in the sun, it just changes her physically and emotionally. It's so good for her. So we're in that mode of coming out of the darkness of winter. And it really speaks to what we're going to do here in the coming weeks as a church family as we journey, as we move toward Easter. So this series, I'm going to say right up front, has been heavily inspired by John Ortberg. I've been following John for many years, 20 years or more. He has pastored on the West Coast for a long time. He's a theologian and a teacher. And about this time last year, he called followers of Jesus to identify themselves in a unique sort of way, which we'll get to in just a bit. But we begin this Sunday, this movement toward Easter and everything that it represents and the reality that's waiting for you and me. This Wednesday is Ash Wednesday. And similar to how Advent works, about 25 days before Christmas, we go into the Advent season. Our church talks about this. We celebrate Advent every year in December as a faith community. The anticipation, it's setting the heart in our minds on the anticipation of Jesus' arrival, not just 2,000 years ago, but his arrival into my heart, my life, my friendships, my junk and struggles, that he makes himself available and cares and comes close to me. And so much so, we so much in Advent set our minds and hearts on the arrival of Jesus that we prepare ourselves to become the incarnation, not just Jesus literally coming to this world as he did and literally coming close to me, but that I would become an extension of the love of Jesus, that you and I would extend him, into our community, into our world. So that's what Advent is. And similar to that, Ash Wednesday, this coming Wednesday, begins the season that the church, when the church was ancient, centuries ago, began a tradition that is called Lent. And Lent is the 40 days or so of setting minds and hearts, focuses on Easter, preparing ourselves for Easter. And so Lent is really known, I guess, kind of famously, even among irreligious people, for a couple of things. First of all, when the ashen cross is placed on the forehead on Ash Wednesday. And Lent is also known for giving up something. And and sort of a sacrifice to Lent, or sacrifice for the sake of Easter. And I'll come back to that in just a minute. But this is where it all begins, the idea of ash, the focus on ash and Ash Wednesday. It begins in the Old Testament in Isaiah 61. It's interesting that when Jesus walks into the temple and reveals that it's when he kind of goes public and reveals that he is going to be teaching about the nature of God, and eventually people would recognize him as the Messiah, he unrolls the ancient scroll of the prophet of Isaiah and reads this very text. Isaiah, the prophet in the Old Testament, whose foretelling of the Messiah who would come, is speaking of Jesus here. The Spirit of the Sovereign Lord is on me because the Lord has anointed me to proclaim good news, not to the religious, not to the people in every town and village who are considered righteous, not to the wealthy who somehow can pay for God's favor. No, God has anointed me. The Lord, he says, has anointed me, meaning Jesus, to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim freedom for the captives and release for prisoners from darkness. Not just people in jail and in physical prisons, but to release us from our inner prisons, the prison of our past, of our regrets, of our habits, those things that paralyze us, the anxieties and fears. Jesus is saying it's the hurting, it's the wounded, it's the emotionally wrecked, it's the lonely. Those are the people that I've come for. And then verse 3, to bestow on them a crown of beauty instead of ashes. And so in the Old Testament, ash became this common theme for reminding us, first of all, where we came from. God created man and woman literally from the dirt, the earth of the ground, and that we will return to dust, to ash. We say at funerals, dust to dust, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. It's a reminder that no matter what you accumulate in your life, no matter how you succeed, eventually your destiny is dust and ash again. But in the Old Testament, ash also refers to parts of our lives, hurts and bad moments and painful mistakes, habits that we seem to not be able to shake, the wounds that we receive from other people, can be referred to as the death or the decay or the ash of some part of our lives. And so without something or someone who could turn the ash into something beautiful, that's our destiny. And so ash represents, it's this reminder that this is ultimately my destiny unless someone does something to change it all, to turn my broken, to turn my pain, to turn the challenge that I have as a parent or the way I compare myself to someone else, or how I can't seem to stop the aging process of my body and how I feel like I'm just getting older or my memory is slipping, or just the broken friendship that maybe has become death or ash in your life. And that's the promise that Jesus, not only was made about Jesus, that would be his role, but Jesus stands up in the temple and announces, I'm here. The Messiah has arrived, and I have come to the broken. I'm speaking and teaching to the hurting. I'm going to spend all of my days and all of my time with those who are wounded in some way, or dejected or rejected by the religious system. Lou Pizzoli and I just had lunch again last week at the Aldi General Store. And many of you know Lou Pizzoli. He suffered a stroke in September this fall, and it's changed his life in so many ways. And we were sitting at lunch at the general store in Aldi. And if you know Aldi, in historic the old part of Aldi, facing Route 50 is the general store. And we were sitting inside having this conversation about, what is God doing in pain and in challenge? And some parts of this conversation were challenging, and then it ended really well. We were focused on the good that God always is working and always has in mind, even in circumstances that we can't explain right now. When we trust Jesus in his resurrection to renew, to make new, to make good, to rebuild, he does. And he knows what he's doing. And so we were having this conversation, and it hit me, wow, This general store was there when I was a little kid. I remember when we would drive on Route 50 to Dulles Airport or to Northern Virginia for some reason, we would crack our windows when we came into the town of Aldi because of the smoke from the barbecue smoker that would sit to the right side of the parking lot of the general store. And it just smelled so good, and that became a habit of my brothers and mine that we would do growing up. And about 7 or 8 years ago, this iconic store that I would stop in and get a sandwich or get snacks, I didn't hear it in the news, but I drove by one day and it was burned down. It was so shocking to me. And my family, we were all just so sad, like, oh my gosh, did you see what happened? We were calling each other. The Aldi General Store burned. I mean, it was just this ashen skeleton and heap of a charred mess. And we were so heartbroken until about, I'm guessing, 8 or 9 years ago, after the fire, it was rebuilt. And a funny thing about the old Aldi General Store, as much as we loved it and I would stop in to get food and snacks, it wasn't very pleasant inside. The floor wasn't just rustic, it was really dirty. There was one day I stopped in and the flies were so bad inside, I was going to order a sandwich. I just couldn't. I left hungry. I didn't buy a snack. I didn't buy anything. No chips, nothing. And I remember just like, oh man, this fly problem that we had noticed. Anyway, when it was rebuilt, it was beautiful. It still has this rustic, like kind of farmhouse barn charm to it, but it's new and clean. I don't think I've ever seen a fly in the last 8 years ever in the place. And I'm sitting there having this conversation with Lou about how God makes hurt and pain and broken and loneliness and the challenges of life good. He really does. This is what the resurrection is all about. When we allow Jesus into our lives, we're inviting his resurrection into all the pain or just what we're not able to accomplish or into our weaknesses or limitations. And how appropriate that it clicked that, wow, even in this building that's happened. This building is an example of ash being turned into something beautiful. A lot of people refer to Lent, the giving up of something at Lent, and I've heard this my whole life, almost in sort of a drudgery kind of tone, like I've given up meat for Lent, like they're being tortured. And it's often expressed that something's being given up for Lent. Not even for Jesus. It's like the religious tradition is so important. I'm giving this up because this is what good Catholics do, or this is what my tradition says that I should do. I've given up music, or I've given up a meal every day, or some pleasure, or some possession. And it's sad to me because I've wanted to say, I've never actually said this to anyone, but when I hear that kind of tone, I'm tempted to say, you might as well not even bother. You don't need to just start eating the meat. Just, do the thing that you've given up because you've missed the point. Lent is this anticipation of the coming of Easter. And yes, the ancient church has practiced for centuries this idea where everyone gives up something of a meal or something of a favorite food or, today even maybe a technology in anticipation of Easter, but it's not that you're giving up something, it's that you're making room for more. You're actually making room, you're mentally and in the pace of your life recognizing every day you've set this reminder, I'm doing without that I crave or out this enjoyment because I'm making room in my heart for the new, for the beautiful, for the renewal that Jesus offers when I follow him, when I give him my life. A lot of people don't understand why Easter is placed on the calendar the way it is. It actually frustrates a lot of people. And here where we live in Loudoun County spring break, the school spring break is actually attached to Easter weekend. So our spring break moves every year as Easter moves. A lot of people wish Easter was like Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving's the fourth Thursday of every November. Why can't Easter just be the second Sunday of April? It moves because it's set to the Jewish calendar, related to Passover, And it's actually beautiful. So Easter is on the first Sunday, the first day of worship, that follows the first full moon that follows the spring equinox. And if that seems like some kind of weird merging of science and faith, and it's really meaningless, it actually is pretty powerful. So the spring equinox, March 21st, is the day when light and dark are equal in our day. And the next day, March 22nd, there's a little bit more light than there is dark. And the next day, there's even more light than there is dark. And the first full moon following the spring equinox represents the moon reflecting the most amount of the sunlight at nighttime in the dark before this Sunday, where we celebrate the light that has come to reverse all darkness. Whatever the darkness is that you faced, whatever the darkness is you would define right now as the dark moment of your life or the dark circumstance. There's a story that happens in Luke that really sets in perspective how it is that we step into renewal, how it is that we actually live the resurrection. We experience the resurrection of Jesus in our lives right now, regardless of what we faced. When Easter's just a religious event on the holiday, on the calendar, and it's a Sunday where churches tend to fill up a little more. There's crowds that are bigger because people feel like I need to be in church on Easter. You've missed it. You've missed it. You're observing something maybe in hopes of God's favor, or God already favors you. Jesus already came 2,000 years ago because he favors you. Easter is allowing into our brokenness what actually reverses the broken, what actually turns ash into beauty, what actually makes old new. That all began with Jesus' resurrection. And so there's a story in Luke chapter 6 that really brings, I think, into full frame how we step into the experience of Easter, how we actually experience in our workday, in our relationships, in life right now, the resurrection of Jesus. And it's not by pretending, and it's not by walking through the doors of the church, smiling big, acting as if everything's okay. It's through this way. Now, if you've been kind of half listening to this point, I'm urging you to tune into this story, because this has everything to do with a future where you see Jesus alive in you and working in you and affecting other people, changing your emotional state into one that's more hopeful, regardless of what your past is. So hear the story in Luke chapter 6. On another Sabbath day, Jesus is teaching again in the synagogue, and a man was there whose right hand was shriveled. Now the Pharisees, as they've been doing, and we read this in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, all four of the gospel writers, tell us repeatedly how the Pharisees are trying to trap Jesus in a mistake, in a teaching mistake, where he somehow contradicts the Old Testament, or he contradicts what they think of as the character of God. They're trying to discredit him as coming from God, and certainly as the Messiah. They're doing that again here. They're hoping that maybe he'll heal again. Maybe he'll actually heal on the Sabbath day. It's so crazy the way these guys are so hell-bent against Jesus that they're actually hoping he'll do something good for someone to discredit him as working on the Sabbath day, which is breaking, in their minds, God's law. It's just ridiculous. That's what's happening there. Pharisees and the teachers of the law were looking for a reason to accuse Jesus. So they watched him closely to see if he would heal on the Sabbath day. But Jesus knew that they were thinking what they were thinking, and he said to the man with the shriveled hand. Now I'm going to stop right there and put this into context. Especially in this day, in Jesus' day, in ancient Palestine, in the eastern part of the Roman Empire here, especially would this man have reason to hide this hand. Most definitely, he keeps it covered with clothing as often as he can. In this warped religious construct of a society, someone with a condition like this was considered unclean. Either his parents did some kind of sin, or he has sinned in some way that deserved this, and God's favor is not upon him, and it even affects his status in society. And so this is something to be concealed. This is something to cover up, to keep hidden. And Jesus sees this man. He knows this man is there, the man with the shriveled hand, and he, in front of everyone, in front of the Pharisees and all the people that Jesus is teaching, he calls out to this man and says, "Get up and stand in front of everyone." It's like, what is Jesus doing? He's calling out this man who wants to remain obscure. He wants to blend into the crowd. He's there to hear Jesus. That's the context. Jesus is teaching. Jesus has this reputation. We know that from the Pharisees trying to discredit him. This man is there because something about this Jesus has captured the attention of the towns and the villages and even in Jerusalem. And so he's anxious to hear what Jesus would have to say, but he certainly doesn't want to be noticed. And he certainly doesn't want his hand to become the object of the moment. Jesus to this man says, "Get up. Stand in front of everyone." And so the man listened to Jesus. He obeys and he stands up. Then Jesus said to them, "I ask you, which is lawful on the Sabbath day?" In other words, what is the true law of God's heart? To do good or to do evil? He's implying if we ignore the needs of people, that's actually evil. To save life or to destroy it? To leave someone hurting or to actually rescue and offer hope? Which is the law of God? He's asking this rhetorical question. He looked around at all of them, and then he says to the man, "Stretch out your hand." Jesus could have healed him and just let it be a quiet healing. Jesus actually asked this man to do the very thing that this man, it's probably horrific, this thought of this man being asked to stretch out the very symbol in his society of why he's looked down upon or why he's rejected. It's every bit of the reminder of what his challenge, his greatest challenges in life, stem from. It's probably why he has trouble finding work. And Jesus asks him to extend this broken part of himself out in the open. "Stretch out your hand." The man did so, and his hand was completely restored. Now, if we took the time to read on here, in verse 11, the Pharisees are furious. The word is furious. And they're trying to figure out how to put an end to Jesus. It's mind-numbing how blind these Pharisees are. And the real point here is that Jesus often is waiting for you and me, not to pretend that we're good or to lean into our success or to keep ignoring the pain or the habits or the ugly and try to focus or put our own spotlight on the good side of ourselves, or to put on our Sunday best for Easter and all the big moments on the church calendar. Jesus is asking us to step into resurrection and into everything that he has planned for you and me by being transparent and vulnerable and owning and being honest about our limitations, about our hurt, about our brokenness, maybe the way someone has treated you. I struggle. Talk about keeping it real. There are days where I struggle wondering if I'm a good enough pastor. I'm confident that God has called me to be a pastor. I love my job. I love what I do. But there are days in the quiet of night before I go to sleep or in certain particular days of the week, it is a recurring, and I think if every pastor were honest, many would say the same thing. John Ortberg last year called to Christ followers this invitation to become part of the fellowship of the withered hand. That if you're truly following Jesus, you leave all pretending and all pretense and all boasting and putting on the best version of yourself, and you allow Jesus to touch and to see the hurt, the loss, maybe the thing that scares you the most. Some of us parents will, if we're honest, will say we just don't know if we're very good parents. Some of us find ourselves in marriages where it just hasn't worked out the way we dreamt. And maybe the more inner struggle that reveals is some selfishness. Maybe you, maybe we struggle with more selfishness than we realized was possible when married to an imperfect person. I don't know what your struggle is. Maybe it's financial. Maybe your withered or shriveled hand is a financial crisis. Maybe it's the loss of a friendship or a relationship struggle. Maybe it's your outlook on your future career. I don't know what your withered hand is, but Jesus is calling you to approach him with honesty. Allow him to call out of you that deepest hurt, the darkest part of your winter. And when you and I allow him to touch those places and to see those places, he begins the movement toward resurrection. He begins moving toward us. As we move toward Easter, he begins moving toward us with renewal and beauty in place of ashes, in place of death, in place of what's lost or broken. What is your withered hand? What is that place in your life? Maybe you've tried to keep hidden. Maybe you haven't acknowledged to anyone. Maybe no one knows. Maybe no one knows it. Maybe you've tried to hide it from yourself. It's not too bad for Jesus. It's not too sinful for him. It's nothing beyond the scope of his love and his rebuilding and his power and ability to make new. So as we begin this journey, this movement toward Easter, I'm going to ask you in this week where a lot of the ancient church acknowledges Ash Wednesday, what is your withered hand? What is that broken place in your life? Maybe that, if you're honest, is embarrassing. And will you give it to Jesus? Will you allow him to begin renewing and what only he can do in giving you a crown of beauty in place of ash? I'm also going to end today by asking you, what are you going to give up? And again, I'm just going to be honest with you. I'm giving up alcohol, not just wine. I really enjoy wine a couple nights a week after busy days. I'm giving up all forms of alcohol until Easter Sunday. That may not seem important to you. I'm not even really sure if it's something important to give up for me. It's just something I'm giving up so that whenever I think, a glass of wine would be nice right now, or over dinner or with friends, it will just be a constant reminder, quiet reminder to me that I am making room for the power of the one who turns old into new and broken into beauty. Journey with me. Let's journey together toward Resurrection Sunday as we allow Jesus to come close to these broken places in our lives. I love you so much. You are loved. Wherever you are, whatever your struggle, whatever the darkness, whatever your winter has looked like, you are loved by the one who brings us into spring.